So let's assume that we've visited a mid-terrace property. It's a Victorian period property. It has solid walls. It's got a solid concrete floor, and it's got gas central heating. The windows are single glazed wooden double hung sliding sash windows, and we've got 50mm of Rockwool insulation in the roof. And so we're wanting to do an assessment of this property for excess cold. So if we're looking at the operating guidance, we see that the ideal is going to be to have some form of insulation for the walls, which we don't have. We've only got one layer of brickwork. And to have 270mm of Rockwool insulation in the roof, and to have UPVC double glazing. Now, interestingly, the main source of heat loss from the property are the walls and the roof, not the windows, which only account for something like 20% of the heat loss. So when we're considering this, the fact that we've only got 50mm of Rockwool insulation in the loft would lead us to think that we might well need to do something about that. We might have a significant score for excess cold at this property. So if we're wanting to work out what that likelihood is going to be, there's two sets of worked examples that you can use that are attached to this program. The first is the worked examples which are the standard national worked examples, which were released in 2006, and that's what we've got on the screen now. The other set of worked examples are a more informal set that have been collected through a number of benchmarking exercises where a wide range of professional HHSRS surveyors have collectively scored some new worked examples, and they have decided what are acceptable likelihoods and harm outcomes. And so when they've done this, they have come up with some new worked examples which are accepted for use by working professionals. So you can choose one or the other. The worked examples that are associated with this program, which I think might be the file may be entitled Henry's Worked Examples, are appropriate, so are very helpful because there are more to choose from. So it's much more likely that you're going to be able to find one that's very similar to the property which you're inspecting. So for the example and for the purposes of this little recording, we consider our Victorian period property, and so we're going to look through the original and national worked examples and try and find one that's broadly similar. So this is the first one, which is a flat in a prefab block, which is not what we want. The next one is an older period property with single glazing but louvre windows, and this one has gas fires. So we don't have that, we've got gas central heating, so it's not quite what we want. If we look at this, this is a rather more unusual dwelling. This is a BISF, British Iron and Steel Federation house, which is a house which has metal walls, metal floors, and they've got a little bit of Rockwool in between them. And that's really quite dissimilar to what it is that we're looking at. So we scroll down a bit further, and we have the last one of the excess cold worked examples, and this is a Victorian period mid-terrace property with single glazed double hung sliding sash windows. It's got gas central heating, but it has no loft insulation. So we know this is pretty close to what we've got. So if we look at the likelihood, the national average is 1 in 330. So they've chosen a representative scale point that's a little worse than the average, because the average property by now, if it's a Victorian period terrace, will probably have some loft insulation in. it's probably going to have about 100 millimeters of loft insulation in. And so it's maybe 200 millimeters if they put in 2 layers. So if we consider this by national average property, we'd also say that the average property from a Victorian period by now is at least 60-70% of them will have UPVC double glazing. So they have said that their property has a score of approximately 1 in 180. So they're saying that there's a 1 in 180 chance of cold causing some kind of adverse health issue over the next 12 months in this particular property. So we start off with this, and we have then to choose whether we think our example is slightly better or slightly worse than this example. If it's, I don't think it's slightly worse because we might have single glazing, but most of the heat is lost through the roof. So because we've got some rock wool insulation, we're a little better than this example. So we would say that our property was either 1 in 180, or maybe it's the next representative scale point along, which is 1 in 320. We'll talk about what representative scale points are in just a second. So we'd try to make a decision whether we stayed in the 1 in 180 bracket, just the same as this worked example, or we go one bracket less likely for like the chance of some kind of health issue over the next 12 months, in which case we say that it was 1 in 320. So we've got a choice of one or the other. So you can see, having gone from the whole range of potential scores, we've narrowed it down to just a couple that we can choose from. So that's how we use the worked examples to sort out the likelihood scoring.